And we are live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for waiting. As usual, I'm sure you guys are super used to it by now. We'll be joined by Megan in a little bit and hopefully Emma as well. I know that she's struggling with her power going out, which is not fun. But yeah, there'll be more of us soon. Today's chat is on rejection. And I think we'll probably start off by talking a little bit about what types of rejection you face in your writing career, in your writing life. I know there are all sorts of rejection and all levels of rejection, both in traditional publishing and not as much in self-publishing, but I'm sure that comes too with reader rejection and negative reviews and all that type of thing. So if we want to start us off, I have Rachel on my left. I don't know if you've got a rejection tale to tell.
Nothing too extreme. I mean, yeah, I was kind of just saying earlier in the pre-chat that I am kind of the least qualified to talk about this because I haven't had a very long writer career, if you can even call it that. But I've submitted enough things to literary magazines and online papers and stuff that I've gotten a couple things. Nothing too horrible, just I've gotten a couple of things being like, oh, it's not what we're looking for, or this needs a lot of work, like it's not sophisticated enough, which was like, that was a hard one for me because I think I was like 16, like really trying to get this one article into
Did someone really
an
say
online
not
magazine.
Sophisticated enough? Because that's rough.
I don't know if they said not sophisticated, but it was like that. Like that was the gist of it. Was like we needed to be more mature, and I was like, I was so heartbroken because I thought that it was like so well wrten, and of course, I still have it somewhere on my computer, and I found it the other day and I read it. I was like, oh god, like this needs so much work. So of course, you look back at your own stuff, being like, oh god, like I could have done so much better.
They were right, but they didn't have to be a jerk about it.
Right? Yeah, they were a little bit pretentious anyway. So like, all right, fine. And then the other one is more just like they want you to change everything. Like, oh, we love your idea. If you could change this, 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 and this, and you're like, but that's not even my original idea. Like, what the heck, guys? So, if that counts, like a subsection of rejection. I've experienced plenty of that.
It does. And Kyra?
Lots of querying rejection. I've had like one book that I've like queried fully and shelved. I technically had a book before that I think I sent like a total of 5 queries on before realizing it wasn't ready. So technically I've queried 2 books, but mostly just one. I've also been rejected for jobs in the publishing industry. So
yeah, that's a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah.
For myself, I've definitely been rejected at like almost every level now, because I'm traditional publishing and self-publishing, and there's, like I said, not as much rejection in the self-publishing world, but I've been turned down for interviews, or like readers sometimes reject, like, I didn't like this book, the DNF reviews. I feel like that's another form of rejection.
Yeah.
They put your book down, they didn't like it. And then, of course, in traditional publishing, you've got rejection at all the different levels. Before I even queried, I started out trying to get published in literary magazines, and like the kind of they were fantasy genre magazines, but things like Sci-Fi and Fantasy Magazine and Cemetery Dance, and those are the more like kind of hoity-toity literary genre magazines, if that makes sense. And so I wasn't ready by any means, but a lot of this rejections that came back were like either form rejections or some like kind of harsher rejections. And so I literally have a whole box of those rejections. Like I filled up a whole, like, not just a shoe box, but like a boot box, one of the long ones. So, and I used to actually put them up on my walls, I could have wallpapered a couple walls, I think, with them, until I realized I don't like short stories. I don't read them. I don't write them on my downtime just for fun. So what the heck am I doing? What I wanted to do is write a novel. So I went into that. And of course, querying is like a whole nother level of rejection. And so I started getting a whole bunch more rejections. And it kind of, I think, learn to deal with them, or you kind of get numb to them. And so I finally did get an agent. And then the next level of rejection is, of course, going on submission and having actual editors at big publishing houses tell you that your work stinks. So that's kind of the ultimate rejection, because it can feel really, really crushing, because I've gone to what's called the editorial board a couple of times, where they actually the editor likes it and they take it to the team, and then the team says, no, we don't think this is going to sell. And so that's kind of like a high and then a crash, which is like probably one of the most painful rejections that I've had so far, but it's all part of the business. So yeah, you learn to deal.
It's kind of funny what you're saying about like keeping a box full of rejections, because I know a lot of people who do that, and I'm like very not that way. I'm like, I get a rejection, I like read it and I like accept it, and then I'm like, okay, it doesn't exist anymore, and it's like gone from my head.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably healthy.
It is healthier, I think, but it depends on the person. Like some people, like the reason I did
some
that.
People are like really motivated by.
Yeah, exactly. They get like angry and then they're like, no, I reject your rejection and I'm going to work harder. And if that works for you, that's awesome. Like I know a writer who literally makes jewelry out of her rejection slips. Like she cuts them up and like she cuts them up and like puts and coats them in like shellacs them or whatever it's called, and then she makes bracelets and necklaces, which I thought is pretty cool.
That's hilarious
and a lot of work actually.
Yeah, but a lot of work. You just like wear your rejection all over you.
I kind of like, one I know Lauren DeStefano, who's one of my favorite writers, has it's not a rejection, but it's like a very negative review like on her Twitter, because she thought it was she kind of thought it was funny because the person had said that the book was super inappropriate, most inappropriate book I've ever read, which is funny. So that kind of thing. I don't know which book it is for, but yeah, I thought it was pretty funny too. So like sometimes if you can get a really stinging rejection, either putting it on your wall or making jewelry out of it. I know one person made a shirt out of it for some reason. I don't know where my rejections.
That's great.
Yeah. But rejections can make a great story for later, right? Like J.K. Rowling was rejected, and Stephen King was rejected, and even Stephanie Meyers, I think, had some nasty rejections. Like, you should probably stop writing, and then it's satisfying to come back to those later. I think that's why I kept them, so I can be like, I'm going to go through my rejections and then kind of laugh about them, because I have a book on the shelves now, or I will soon. So I like to be able to look through them, and also it makes you realize that you have improved and that you are better than you were, So yeah, but I think something that we will all experience as writers and that we will all learn to deal with, and I think that's another good question, is how have you guys dealt with it, and what are some techniques you would suggest? And Rachel, again, is on my left here.
Okay. I just take it more as constructive criticism. Like when just because I'm in the publishing industry, I'm in like the reader, writer, book industry, reviewing industry. I'm also in the fashion industry. Like it's just, I'm surrounded by the idea of rejection. Like I know it's coming. I know it's going to be somewhere. It might be someone saying it to me, or it might be me saying it to someone else. So I'm kind of just accepting of it. So I'd rather have the constructive criticism ones, because if they're like, your writing sucks, go die, I'm gonna be like, okay, like I'm just gonna write you off right away, because I'm like, you don't have nothing to say to me, so like I don't really count that as rejection. I just count that as like someone being ridiculous. But if someone's like, hey, I don't like, I didn't finish it because the pacing was too slow, like, okay, fine, that's something I can work on and I can fix. So it's kind of like learning how to weed out the negative from the constructive, if that makes any sense. And you know what? Sometimes you're just gonna have, and I'm gonna go way into like, you're wonderful and you can do it, and like this is like a life lesson, and like all that. I'm trying not to do that, but like if you have people that just don't like it, then like there's always gonna be someone that's not gonna like it. So you just kind of have to be like, well, that's your opinion, and I have my own opinion over here of what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna go do that.
Yeah. Kyra.
Well, and I definitely agree, because like I've definitely had rejection where it's like sometimes you get it back and it's like, wait, what? Like, you just feel like they totally misunderstood. Like, there's just nothing useful that comes from it. And I think part of that, too, I was going to say my big thing is, like, taking a step back and taking time. And, like, sometimes the amount of time, like, can be anything from, like, overnight. And then, like, the next day I'm kind of cool with it. Or, like, 1 to 2 months is, like, the worst I've ever had, where I was just, like, coping. But kind of taking a step back, and I think that gives you time to evaluate. Like, you get beyond just the like emotion of like, oh, they didn't like my book, and more into like, okay, I'm ready to evaluate objectively if this is like criticism I want to like take and actually apply, or if it's just they didn't see what I was trying to do with the book, and this isn't helpful for me.
I think it's hard because sometimes, particularly with querying, you don't always get like a clear, this is why I rejected you. Like, unfortunately for literary agents, and like I am also a literary intern, so I 100% don't blame anyone for doing this, but often it's like kind of a vague sort of, oh, I didn't connect with the book, I didn't connect with the character. And that's really hard to take as a writer and be like, okay, I can change that. Well, change what? Like, it might be that you need to flesh out the character, but it might just be that the literary agent read it and went, well, it's just, you know, not as good as I wanted it to be, but I don't really know. Because I've had that before as somebody who has had to send a rejection where I'm like, I like the story and I think there's talent here, but it wasn't connecting with me, or I didn't love it enough, but it's hard to like say exactly why. So some of those rejections are not necessarily helpful for an author. Sometimes you do get really lucky and they do tell you exactly why and how to fix it. That was one of the reasons that like took my book that is being published next year to the next level, where I was able to get a publishing deal, because I did have a literary agent that was wonderful enough to actually sit down and be like, here's a list of why I'm rejecting you, right? So that was one of the best rejections I've ever had. So if that happens, it's great, but more often it is that vague, like, I just didn't connect, or I just didn't love it enough. And those can be hard.
They can be hard, but you can also, on the flip side, kind of look at that as like, you're doing something right. Like, they weren't able to point, like, these are the very obvious problems. And I've also been on both like the receiving and sending end of those type of rejection letters. Back when I interned at the literary agency, I sent a number of those, and it was usually like, those were a lot of my favorite manuscripts, but they just like, there was something not there, but they were always people that I like wanted to keep in touch with, that I wanted to like see them succeed and do well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm part of a couple of advanced programs, and it is something big where like I'll read the book and I'm like, I can't tell you why, but I didn't like it, or like I didn't like it enough, or I'm like, it was just okay, but I can't be like, oh wow, I hated the main character, or like the ending sucked. I'm just like, I don't know why, and that's the worst part. And I'm trying to give a good review because I can say like, oh, I didn't connect with this because the pacing was off. That's a concrete answer, but I can just like, I don't know why, I just didn't like it. And that's like the most awkward thing, because you're kind of like put into that position of like almost like wanting to make something up so it seems legit, but you can't. So like, yeah, I get it. It's kind of weird. I know it's very unhelpful.
And with agents, it's even more important that they actually love it. Like, just liking it isn't enough a lot of the times, because they're going to be working with this book, and they're going to be pushing this book to editors. They're going to be like cheerleading this book and promoting this book. So they need to really, really love it, not just be like, yeah, it was good, I enjoyed it. They have to really. Yeah. So if they just don't have that full connection where they want to be like selling it to publishers for months.
Yeah, well, then, like, the point is to make money. Like, this is what it is. Like, you can say like, oh, it's like an artistic industry, but like their point is to make money. So if someone has to really love your book and believe that a bunch of other people are going to love it too, before they're going to, before they're going to touch it, and that's sometimes they don't believe that.
Yeah, actually, Emma makes a really good point, because yeah, like the agent has to be like, they're going to not only work on this for months and months and months with you and reread it over and over and over, but then they're going to have to still turn around and still be super enthusiastic when they're selling it to the editors. So they have to really, really love it and have connected to it. So yeah, that's a really good point. Like, they might not necessarily have a huge problem with your book, but it might just be like, and I have had the rejections where it's like, I liked it, but I didn't love it enough, which probably means good things. It probably means they are just not the agent for you, and you might have an agent that really does connect with it later on. So that's not necessarily a bad rejection to get either. So we're just talking, Emma, about also ways to, Megan too. We're just talking about ways to cope with rejection, and the best thing that you found that works to kind of not get over it, but maybe like adjust to it, or be able to live with it. So we've had answers from everyone, but Megan's on my left, so we'll start with you right off the bat.
Okay, sorry, could you repeat the question one more time? I'm feeling
I thought I hit you with something right away as soon as you came on. We're just talking about ways to cope with rejection, really, when you get a rejection. the best way you found to pull yourself out of a slump or not let yourself be kind of dragged down by it.
Okay, yeah. I feel like it's twofold. There's like having good writing friends to be like, hey, you don't suck. It's fine. It's subjective. And having a second project to work on and like distract me from the one that's getting rejected.
Yeah, actually, that's huge, is having another project that I can be bummed out about this other project, but it kind of gives you a little bit of hope, like, well, maybe this one is the one. So that's actually something, that's a really good point. That's something that I had the whole time too. Emma?
Yeah, just distraction in general is good, whether it's like another project or like reading a book that you've really been wanting to read or going and doing something fun with like a friend, like just something to get your mind off of it for a little while, you know, so that you can like kind of just move on from it.
I think sometimes too, what helped me is like, sometimes I think there's a kind of a thought process that a writer has to like, you know, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just like get nose to the grindstone and get your next project out there. And I think you can sort of just let yourself feel what you feel initially though. And I think that's important to realize that, yeah, it does suck. You're allowed to be depressed. You're allowed to acknowledge to yourself, yeah, that sucked, that hurt. And I think that's an important part of the process too. It's almost like you go through, especially for me, I found when I had multiple rejections on a project that I knew, okay, it's time to shelve it. That was really, really hard. And for me, that, like I said, is almost like a grieving process where you're like, this manuscript is dead. And I need to put it away and I need to do something else because it's not going to sell. And so I would always let myself have that time to be depressed about it, right? Because it's not a little thing. It was a lot of work, and it's okay, I think, to let yourself be emotional, but not for too long, right?
Yeah.
Let yourself have that, and then
I think an important part of coping with rejection is going into things in the first place with realistic expectations. And not going into it being like, I'm going to send this to 3 agents and they're all going to want it, you know, like my top 3 agents, I'm sending it to them and all of them are going to fight over it, you know, like going in, or, you know, like going to send this to publishers and I'm going to go to auction, you know, just like knowing that it can take a long time and like knowing what typical, you know, because like sometimes you hear stories like, you know, J.K. Rowling was rejected 10 times or whatever it is and you're like, wow.
Which is always, you know, people always tell me that, and it's never writers. It's never writers that tell me this, because I'm like, wait a sec, I'm just going to go over here and laugh hysterically, because 10 times is really good.
So like on
and then
like,
cry.
On like Twitter or in different like writing like forums and chats and stuff, you can always find the people who don't go in with realistic expectations, because they're always the people that are like, I've gotten 15 agent rejections. Should I just give up on this book? You know, like it's like things like that. And you're like, no, that's not a realistic expectation. So
that's just
really
the beginning.
starting off knowing like what is normal and knowing what the worst case scenario is, what the best case scenario is, I think can help you once those rejections do start coming in, because you kind of like expect to set your expectations a little bit low sometimes.
Yeah, that's huge, I think. Yeah, I see that all the time. I've had 35 rejections. Should I put it away? I'm like, no, you're just starting. That's like round 1, like buckle up. So yeah, I think that getting, like you said, going into it, do your research, learn what's normal, join Facebook groups with other authors that are querying, and then not only can you commiserate with each other when you do get those crappy rejections, but you have a realistic idea of when you should shelve your book, and it's not at 12 or 30 rejections, because that's nothing really. So
yeah, I mean, like by the time I got my agent, I had queried 3 books, 2 real, queried 1. I only sent out a few and was like, this book is never gonna happen. But I racked up probably like 150 or 160 rejections, like a lot of rejections, and I still feel like I got this absolutely amazing agent who I love, and like, so just because the people you think are your top 5 agents have rejected you doesn't mean at all that you're not going to find a perfect place for your book.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important point while you're querying is like you can definitely have dream agents, but go into it knowing that your dream agents might not be the agent that is meant to represent you. It might not be the person that you're going to connect with or that's going to connect with your story. And you might find an agent that wasn't even on your list or on your radar that turns into your dream agent. Like my agent was someone that I queried because she was with a really, really good agency, but I had never, she wasn't like on my top 3 dream agents that I constantly hear about and that everyone's always talking about, but I couldn't be happier with her. She's so communicative. She knows what's important to me and she's going to keep, and she's great at negotiating things. She, I couldn't ask for a better agent, and I hadn't even heard of her name when I first started querying, right? So it's okay to have dream agents, but like don't fixate on them to the exclusion of all else.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those dream agents, they are so busy because they have all these amazing clients that they can't take on very many new people, or they're closed for submissions altogether. So you really do need to look outside of just those like big name people.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely think we can talk about, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know if people watching are more querying short stories or they're querying novels or what kind of rejection they're experiencing. If you guys have questions, we do have one question. If a writer can get a second chance after being rejected, it does depend on who you're rejected by. Like in a short story market, if you're trying to get your short story published in a magazine, no, you won't get a second chance with the same person. You can keep trying to send the story out. And then for querying, not generally, I feel like, unless
Not
the
with the
agent,
same story.
unless the agent asks you for another look. There's an
Yeah.
R&R, which is like redo it and then send it back to me.
Yeah, revise
and that's pretty common. Yeah.
One of the things you can do, I have had a lot of friends from Pitch Wars do this with great success. If an agent does take a lot of time to give you very personalized feedback on your full, it doesn't hurt to be like, hey, if I make these changes, like, would you be interested in a revise and resubmit? And they'll be honest with you. Like, if they give you that much feedback and they care that much about your success, it doesn't hurt to ask, but only if they give you very personalized feedback, not just like, it didn't connect with me, but like, I liked this thread. However, I feel like you should maybe cut it and focus on something like this.
But yeah, generally, if it's you're sending it to one agent, you wouldn't like change a few things and send it again. Like that's not generally something that would happen. So
Or like send it again 6 months later, hoping they're more in the mood for that kind of
Hoping
book.
that
don't ever do that.
They will remember. I have seen multiple agents on Twitter talk about how like they do like recognize your query when you send, or your book when you send it in again, and like some of them like block your address after you've done it like 3 times. So
oh yeah, I had that before. I think probably it was just a second time, so I think probably the person just, because I've done that before. You have the Excel spreadsheet, but if you like put a name in the wrong column or you forget to enter someone and then you're like, oh crap, I've queried them twice. But I did recognize the name. I went, I already rejected you. Like, but yeah, no, I just sort of brushed it off because I was like, it's probably a mistake. I've made it myself, but it's try not to.
I know one agent I saw talking about it recently. She said, the second time she just like assumes that you made a mistake and like got disorganized or something.
The third time.
She's like the third time I blocked your email address.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. There is an instance. It's not like this will definitely happen to you or anything. But if you get an agent with a book and that book sells, there is always a chance that an old book that you've shelved in the past can get resurrected. Like, say your publisher wants another book from you. You could be like, hey, I have this one. Are you interested in this one? I can work on it. And that's not unheard of, like, at all.
Yeah, I actually have the sort of a similar situation to what Megan's talking about with the one I just sent, because my publisher bought 2 books. So the one I've just sent them, they could turn it down. It's very possible. But the proposal I sent them is basically a book that like I had in Pitch Wars in like 2014 that was rejected like multiple times after being requested multiple times, which was a little bit crushing, I'm not going to lie. But then I sent it to my agent afterwards as a second book, and she said, great, rewrite all of this. So that was fun, but it's a completely different book now. So I've sent that proposal on to the publisher. They could say, no, let's try again, but it would be pretty cool, I think, if it did, you know, get accepted, and because I've rewritten this stupid thing like 3 times. So yeah, lots of rejection, but it's possible that you could, and you know, if you ever get big, like they would probably publish J.K. Rowling's grocery list at this point. So if she does have published,
I'd read it. I want to know what she buys every week.
I don't know.
How does J.K. Rowling eat? What's her diet like?
I heard that J.K. Rowling bought army pants and flip-flops, so I bought army pants and flip-flops.
But yeah, if you get big enough and you have a few in the drawer, the publisher is probably not going to turn them down. They might ask you to substantially rewrite, but even if you shelved a manuscript, it's not like forever lost, or like it wasn't a waste of your time. Right? It's never a waste of your time. So I think that's important to remember, because it can really cushion the blow on rejections and on having to shelve, is say, hey, I might revisit this someday.
And even if you never do, it makes you better. The more you write, the better of a writer you become.
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't be the writer you are now if it weren't for that book. So
yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
I think we have more questions if someone wants to.
Yeah, I've got one ready.
Perfect.
That is kind of related to what we've been talking about. Talo82 asked, how do you know if a novel is dead or if it simply isn't what agents are looking for?
That's a good question. I think like if it depends on what you mean by dead. Like if it's not what agents are looking for, it is going to be dead to me. Like I'm going to put it on the shelf unless I decide to self-publish it, which is, you know, something I would maybe think about, because I do both. But yeah, if agents are not looking for it, you're not going to probably get many requests. So therefore, it will end up dead for me. Probably, I would say, like we said before, like I think I queried one of my books until it had like 200 rejections, and then went, okay, that's probably done. But yeah, 180, 200 for me was when I was like, okay, let's retire this. Because as soon as you start running out of agents to send it to, and you're like, or agents, I should say, that you would want to be represented by, that you are sending it to, that's when I was like, okay, this is done.
Yeah, don't ever
and don't send it to agents that you don't want to represent it.
Yes,
don't do it.
I know, like a few months ago, there was some like controversy on Twitter because some dubious agent, I think, was like, any agent's a good agent, basically, and people were like, no. Like,
I was like, whatever makes you
get
sleep
an
at night.
agent just to have an agent. Like, it needs to be someone that you want to work with.
I'm someone that's going to work for you too.
Yeah, I'm sure that said agent probably was on some like do not query list and was trying to make themselves look better.
I don't know who it was, but I remember everybody tweeting about it.
Yeah, definitely not true.
I do think there's something to be said for having the discernment to tell when your book is just not ready. And that's a really hard thing to get right. I had to shelve the first book I ever queried. I sent it to maybe like 15 agents or something, not very many. And ultimately I decided to pull it, not because I had even gotten like rejections from everyone yet, but because it wasn't good enough. And I knew that I was not good enough yet and needed to practice a little bit more. And it's so hard. Having good beta readers helps. Having writing friends, not just your family, because your family's not going to tell you you're not good enough.
Your mom is going to love it.
My family does.
Yeah. But being able to like have people there who are like, hey, I love you. You're going to get there. This is not it. It's really
that's
useful.
important. Yeah. I think too, because I queried a lot of books, but there were some that, like Megan, that I sent like 8 queries out and then went, no, you know what? This isn't working. Because as you continue going, I think that you'll see the difference. Like for my first book, like I said, like 200 rejections, and then I went, okay, I should probably stop now. But also, all of the rejections were not personalized. I didn't have any feedback on them. Most of them were forms. You know, if they did comment, it was like, I didn't love this, or I didn't connect with this. And there was no more details than that. And as the books I was querying started getting better and my writing started getting better, I got more personalized feedback. I still wasn't getting a yes, but I was getting a, hey, can you revise this? Or like, I liked it, but here were a few things. And I think that's when you start to know that you are close or closer. And then if I, you know, eventually retired that one, went on to the next one, and I think 10 or 11 queries, and I got 0 personal feedback, and went, okay, to me, that's a sign that this book is a swing and a miss. And I went on to the next one. So I think you can sort of start as you get, you know, more into querying and more familiar with it, you can see the patterns and interpret them that way.
Yeah, my second book that I started querying actually was called Forsaken. It's the teal binder back there. I sent out a very large multiple wave series of query letters on it and got like nothing at all. No bites, no, I think I maybe got like a first 3 chapters request, which a lot of agents just ask for the first 3 chapters anyway. So it was like, cool. And then I decided to revise it. And so I went back in and I did hardcore revisions on the book, just like drastically overhauled it. And I sent out another like 10 or 12 queries. And within the next week, I had 5 full requests. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's happening.
The difference.
And then a year and a half later, I got an agent on a different book.
Nice.
But there's a point actually where it's a very frustrating point to be at, and it's called like the nearly there stage, and a lot of writers go through that, and it can be incredibly frustrating. The period where I was going through that stage, I was actually some of the worst like angst that I ever went through, because I was getting, because it's like a crash and burn thing, right? Like I was talking about earlier, where you know you're so close and you can almost taste it, and then you get that no, and it's back down to earth with a crash. And that nearly there stage, I feel like, can last months, or like even like a year or 2 years. Yeah, it can last years.
I feel like I've kind of been in that stage for like a year or 2 now.
It's frustrating. Because you're at a point in your craft where you know you're so close, but you're just not there yet, and you get all this personal feedback, which signifies that, I think, really strongly. Actually, one of the things that kept me going through that, and I'll try to post it in the comments if I can find it, is a blog post that's actually called Surviving Nearly There. Actually, probably if you just Google Surviving Nearly There, you'll find it, because it's one of the top posts. And it's just basically an author talking about that stage, how frustrating that stage is, and like some of the things you can do to like keep yourself going through it, because you will get there. You're so close, type of thing. But yeah, that can be
many a night in tears over being like, it could happen tomorrow, or it could happen in 10 years. Just
exactly.
Like, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And those are some of the most exciting and great, actually, rejections. And they're also some of the most crushing as well, because it's such personal feedback. And that actually had an agent that she was an assistant at New Leaf Literary, and I loved her. I still love her. I still you know, I'm so grateful to her, because so much of her feedback was so bang on and taught me to be a better writer. And it taught me not to rush things, because I rushed through a bunch of her advice and sent it back to her, and it still wasn't good enough. And so that was like a valuable life lesson. But she actually emailed me after the announcement on Publishers Marketplace for Bryony Gray, and said, you know what, congratulations. Like, I'm so excited that this book has made it, and I'm excited to see it on the shelves. And it was so cool, because we'd emailed back and forth so much, and she'd helped me so much. And she rejected me a couple of times, but yeah, it was just, it was frustrating at the time, but now it's really cool. So do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we do. Candace asked, when submitting the same work to multiple places, how do you handle the rejections while still waiting to hear from those who haven't rejected it yet? or who may want to publish it?
One of the things I did, I don't know if this is a great thing to do, but while I was querying, every time I got like a couple rejections, it would make me feel better to sit down and send out like a couple more queries, because to me it was like, oh, I still have control over this, and it felt like
query.
Yes, there's a term for it. But I did that a lot, and it did help keep my sanity, because it feels like you're doing something, you know. I'm not just sitting here crying.
Especially when you are getting the rejections that are like in the almost there stage, where it's like, you know,
like maybe one of these two agents will be the one.
Or maybe the next one will be full of helpful feedback that will take it to the next level, you know. It's always exciting that way too.
For some reason, when you started and you were like, I don't know if this is the best advice, I thought you were going to say, like, take up drinking. And I was like, oh, no, why is that happening?
Right drunk and it's over.
I just suggest that you get smashed every night, every time you get
every time a new rejection comes in.
Flavor. Video's gonna get flagged.
We talk about adult books now.
I was going to say, we're the WordNerds now. We're not just the YA WordNerds now. I can talk about No, I'm just kidding. Also, I'm super pregnant right now, so that's not allowed.
Super don't drink.
No alcohol.
Also, I've been around you when you're drinking and you're a little bit of a lightweight, so.
So it's the girl who was getting drunk on cider.
Yeah. This was a wedding, if anyone wants to know. We don't just get together regularly and party it up.
We were at a wedding.
We're way too nerdy for that.
Yep.
We had another question from Jonathan asking, where is the line between hooking the agent and revealing too much, like in a query letter scenario? If a twist happens early on in the book, like maybe in the first few chapters, is it okay to include it in the query letter, or is saying it like revealing too much?
In the first few chapters, I would do it, because I imagine it kind of sets up the rest of your book.
Yeah, that's part of the setup. So.
Yeah, so I second all of that.
It's what like pushes you. It probably pushes your character into their like story. So.
And if it happens like way later in the book, like, you should have something happening before that should hook your reader, right? Does that make sense? So, like, if you're talking about revealing a big twist that happens, I'd say in the second half of the book, then I'd wonder, like, well, isn't there something in the first half that you could talk about that would be interesting to the reader without giving away the big thing in the second half of the book?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about giving anything away in a query. It should be like the back of a book, right? Where like it tells you about the story and it sets the tone of the story, but it's not like, here's a synopsis of everything that happens. But yeah, don't worry about it, but don't include it if it's just going to, like, because I've seen people that are like, I can tell they want to jam in all this like the cool hooky stuff, like, oh, there's a big plot twist, I'm going to put it in the query as well because it's cool. And then it ends up being too much going on in the query. So as long as that doesn't happen, then like Kyra said, it probably sets up the events of your book, and you should definitely include it.
Yeah. If we've missed your question, please re-ask it. I came in late, so I don't know what's been discussed or not. Have you guys talked about getting over the fear of rejection at all?
No, we haven't.
Like how you deal with it?
No, I cannot, I think, be a huge help on this, because I always thought of querying as like some kind of weird lottery. Like I was always really excited to send out query letters. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'd have to actually keep myself from sending out too many at once. So, and I was never the type of person that, like, I know there's a lot of people that are afraid to share their work, you know, even just with beta readers. And I've just never, like, I'm just like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of, you know, maybe someone tearing it apart, but I've never been so embarrassed of it as to be like, not that you're embarrassed of it, I shouldn't say that, but I've never been shy, I don't think. So I don't know.
I'm just a pessimistic person, so I'm just like always worst case scenario. It's gonna be that everyone's gonna hate me. I'm never gonna succeed in life. Like, so if someone's like, "Hey, I like didn't mind this," I'm like, "Oh my God, this is amazing."
Like I said, low expectations from the beginning.
Low expectations. It's like, yeah, having like the highest expectations of rejection. Like, yeah, so.
Yeah, I have a Thursday video about this in a couple weeks because I pre-filmed some videos.
Wow.
Oh, look at you,
while I was off work
adult.
for the hurricane and had nothing else to do.
Hey.
But in a couple weeks, I have a video that's about like just before you get to like the stage where you're querying, like finding ways to get your writing, like put it out there in a place where people are reading it. I think is really good. Just like getting some, if you're really scared of that, of like putting your work out there and having people not like it, just getting some practice with it really does like help kind of like almost desensitize you a little bit to get used to it. So even if it's just like posting fan fiction or like posting on Wattpad or
Wattpad was great for me in that way.
Yeah, submitting like an essay or a short story somewhere, like little things like that. Posting some poetry on your blog, like whatever, just little ways to put some of your writing out there just so you aren't so scared of it anymore, I think can help.
Yeah.
Absolute Right is like the biggest writers forum of ever. Again, that's Absolute Right. And they have lots of spaces where you can share your work. Everyone's amazing. No one like steals anyone's work. You don't have to worry about that. Like it's just there for writers to help other writers. And I know that's where like a lot of the WordNerds ended up meeting each other originally. So
yeah,
it's amazing. And they have a query letter critique section too, which you can post in after you've posted 50 times on the forums, I think it is. Like after they know you're not just a troll.
Yeah, you have to post a couple of times so that they know you're not just showing up to get your query critiqued, but it is really worth it because I will say, they are not going to sugarcoat it for you. They will tear your query apart and they will tell you why it's terrible. But then if you rework it and come back, they will tell you if it's reached the point where you can query or not. So that's very helpful. And yeah, like Megan said, Kelly and I met each other on there, so.
Yeah, and everyone's usernames are anonymous, so you like don't know their names, which makes it feel easier to me. Like it's not like Erin is telling me my query letter sucks. It's like, no, Jack-o'-lantern is telling me it sucks. That's fine. It's a pumpkin.
It's a pumpkin.
Like I think also with that is the idea of like, you know, if you say like they're not going to sugarcoat it and stuff, and it's kind of like if you can't handle that small, like that rejection on that small of a level, like you're not ready to handle, oh, and we just lost Emma. Oh, okay. Like you're not going to be able to handle it on a higher level. So it's, I mean, like you're going to be having rejection at all levels, and that's like the one to start with, maybe. Like train of thought is like going a little bit around right now, but that's like kind of like general gist of what I'm trying to say is like if you can't handle that, then like you're not ready to handle the rest of what's gonna happen in the future.
Like you're gonna be building a tougher skin, and once those rejections feel like, oh, that was like a little pinch, then you know you're like ready to move on to the next thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like Kyra. I actually found one of the really great ways of kind of adjusting myself to not only criticism, but like some pretty harsh rejection was posting my stuff on Wattpad, because when you've had, you know, like drummer guy 86 tell you that you suck and you need to stop writing forever and ever, having an agent say something like,
screw you, drummer guy 86.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well,
you don't know anything.
and you get a lot of those comments, right? Because it's, I don't know, trolls or something, but you get a thicker skin. And so having repeatedly looking at that type of thing and being like, oh, okay, agent rejections seem a lot more chill. So.
Well, and for me, my experience with Wattpad was like, yeah, I've gotten some negative comments, but for every like negative comment, I've got like 10 positive comments.
It's overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah,
for the most part, yes. Yeah.
Similar with like Swoon Reads, that was very much my experience. It's like I got some very, very helpful feedback from Swoon Reads. And if I do ever revisit that manuscript, like I know exactly what I'm going to do with it now.
Cool.
But people in general were so nice, and like I've made friends there.
See, that's really great, because it not only can you get used to sort of criticism or rejection, so to speak, you're also building a fan base. And I would say, like, because Kyra said Swoon Reads has given her good advice, Wattpad is not necessarily the place to post your work if you want actual valid criticism on it, but it is somewhere to post to not only find a community, because it's a great community, but it's also somewhere to post if you want to kind of get used to people sort of commenting on your story, commenting on your work, basically. So
yeah. Well, I'd say swoon reads for like when you're feeling a little more experienced. Like I wouldn't just throw something up on there because it is like they do select books for publication, and if like also once you submit it there, it's like exclusive to them for I think 6 months. So don't do it if you're like still querying or whatever or planning to query in the future. But yeah, I will totally plug swoon reads. They're great.
Yeah, actually, I met one of the authors, Jennifer Honeyborn. She did her book just came out like a month or two ago. That's Wesley James Ruined My Life. Yeah, and I met her at this preview that I went to, and it was super cool because she said that that's where she did, like, she put it out, and then she was part of some contest that was, you know, like one of the top 5 or top 10 like would get published, and it was based on viewer response and all that kind of stuff, and she said like that was how she got published. And I was like, well, that's super cool. Like I'm definitely gonna check that out eventually, and if I ever write anything kind of romancy, then maybe I'll put that on there.
They actually do more than just romance now. It's open to all YNNA.
Oh, rad.
That's cool.
Most of the ones that get selected still have a pretty strong romance element, just because that's where they got their.
It makes sense.
They're called swoon reads.
That's your brand.
Yeah.
I feel like the thing to know about fear is that it's literally never going to go away, because no matter what stage you're at in the publishing process, except for when you're writing your first ever book and no one is looking at it, like there's the chance of being rejected. Like Erin has a book deal. She has a book coming out in a few short months, and like she's still going to deal with rejection in her publishing career. Oh, yeah. And that's Erin. She's like an amazing freaking writer.
I made me blush.
And so like we're all dealing with
are important. The supportive like
support
group.
Yes.
Well,
see,
also, like,
yeah, when I have a crappy day and the WordNerds tell me how amazing I am, and then I feel so much better.
Well, like also things are never going to go as you think they're going to go. So if you're like, yeah, like this is gonna I'm gonna query this many people, and this many people are gonna say yes, and then I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna revise this, like it's never gonna happen, because there's always gonna be a wrench thrown in plans, and that's kind of thing where you have to prepare. I'm gonna do like the whole you have to expect the unexpected, but it's true because you never know. Like something's always gonna go different than the way that you think it's going to be, and rejection's probably going to have a role in that somehow, somewhere.
Oh yeah, and like Megan said too, like I have a book deal, and I still, you know, attempted to sell like another book I'd written, and I got rejections, and I eventually decided that I didn't love it enough to continue to pursue that particular book. It was just on proposal, luckily, so I hadn't written much of it. But yeah, you can still, like, I was follow a bunch of really big authors on Twitter, and one of them, I can't remember which author it was, but he's like a New York Times bestseller, and he was
Wells,
like,
I think,
Dan Wells.
Is it Dan Wells? Yes, who's saying like I still have had 5 rejections this month or whatever, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, I want to say it was Amy Kaufman, but maybe I'm like it was either Amy Kaufman or Megan Spooner, but they said that they did this little YouTube video, and they showed that they had written like 10 books before their debut ever did. Yeah, and it was like, they like showed it was just like this pile of paper, and they're like, I wrote 10 books before anything got published, like that kind of thing. I was like, what? So that was real.
I think I was doing that too.
Yeah. Pretty sure it was Amy Kaufman.
No, it's Beth Revis.
It is.
Beth Revis. There we go.
Yeah.
Space Adventure somebody author.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Every single book
sorry,
she
Beth
wrote,
Revis.
she queried. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard her talk before about how like she really probably shouldn't have been querying most of those books, but it was like she would write a book and she'd be like, "This is the best thing ever," and she'd like try to query it, and it wasn't the best thing ever. But,
it rarely is.
But I still think it's okay to kind of be in that age of innocence where you like think it's the best thing ever, and for you right then it is.
It doesn't hurt
have to
anything
think like
querying a book.
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier, you can query those same agents with a different book later. So like it's not like if you query with your really crappy book right now that you won't ever be able to query those people again with a better book, So in the end, oh well.
But you also have, I'm going to do like a super cheesy line here, but like you also have to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one's going to believe in you. So like you have to love that manuscript that you have read, or that you've written, because like you're ultimately like you're the one that's going to be plugging it, you're the one that's going to be selling it, you're the one that has to love it, because if you don't love it, like people are going to be able to tell.
Yeah. And then when it gets published, you're gonna have to like do interviews about it and talk about it at different events, and yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right.
true, yeah.
Blog posts, and if you don't like it, then like that sucks. Like how you have to promote this book that you don't even like. Like that's the worst.
That's over the summer. I had a book that I had to shelve that was like rough. That process of like deciding I had to shelve this book because I'd been working on it forever and it like nearly killed me. But that was part of the thing is like I realized like I didn't even like this book anymore. And so even though I like was really eager to have something ready to query and like, you know, I didn't love the book, and like Aaron and Kelly beta read it and they could tell like they're like,
well, and it comes down to having friends that will tell you, because I can tell you right now that Kyra is a terrific writer, and I've read and loved her characters over and over and over. And then for this one, it seemed to me like when I was reading it that I'm like, I don't think Kyra's like completely into this like she usually is.
and I wasn't, and I was like trying very, very hard to convince myself I was. So, and that was like very much like I really needed that real talk from Aaron and Kelly, and I think they were like maybe a little reluctant to be like, hey.
It was, yeah. It's hard to tell your friend that you're like, you're brilliant, but not this one.
Right. Well, it's kind of funny because like I said, like it was a little devastating. Like this is the hardest project I've ever had to shelve, just because like I had a lot invested in it already. But at the same time, I was also like, I kind of wish you told me 3 months sooner, because then I would have like been working on something else that I liked more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So yeah, good writer support system.
Yeah, for sure.
It's important.
It's important.
We had a question. Is there a way to judge if you're getting rejections based on your opening pages, your premise, or your query letter itself?
Beta readers. It's always a good answer, right?
Solid.
When in doubt, beta readers.
And I would say like I have my writing group that's Megan and Aaron Kelly, who read like all my stuff that I sent. Like they've always read all my query letters and whatever. But if I'm like kind of in the middle of querying and I'm getting rejections and I'm going to the point where I like want to kind of retool either my opening pages or my query or synopsis or something, I'll try and find someone who's like never read any of the book, just so I'm getting like an actual really fresh perspective.
Same. I think too, like not every agent has the same submission requirements. Like some agents only want to see your query. Some want to see your query in your first 10 pages. And if you're keeping track of those people, that can be a really good way to gauge as well. Like if they're just requesting the query and you haven't gotten a single request to see more pages from any of those agents, that's a sign that you need to look at your query. If you're attaching the query and the pages, and you're still not getting any requests, then I usually find that you need to take a look at the pages, because a bad query can be overlooked if the pages are spectacular.
Yes.
But if the pages aren't there, then they aren't going to request to see more. The premise is a little more difficult to gauge, and that's where your beta readers and your real talk writer friends are going to help more.
Yeah, I will super second this, because I think when I was interning, so much of the times I would only skim the query if there were pages below, and then just go straight to the pages and just see if I liked the voice, if I liked the character, and then so if it did have pages included and I rejected, it was a good chance it was not the query but the pages that were the problem. I don't know about Kyra, but
yeah, no, if there were pages, I always read them, and I still usually like looked at the query, but
but it's not a deal breaker. I felt if it was
if there were pages,
And again, if you haven't subbed to a ton of agents, just like keep sending, like don't stop until you've sent like 20, and then evaluate what you might need to change, because publishing is so subjective. So subjective, and by that I mean that sometimes an agent that you think is perfect may just not be looking for the kind of story you've written. I always share the example. I don't know if I've ever actually shared it on air, but I used to intern at the Bent agency, a long time ago, and I was a reader, so I would read manuscripts, and then I would write up a brief report on what happened in the book. And based on how I felt about the book, I would tell the agent if I thought they should request or offer on it or reject it, or if I just wasn't sure and I thought they should take another look at it. And the agent would read that, and up until that point, the agent had always agreed with me on things. So I read this book. I did not like it. I didn't think it was ready. I wrote up a big thing about here's all the stuff that happens in this book, and I just don't think it's ready. I think they need more time. Maybe you could offer an R&R, but it's not ready. And the agent got back to me and was like, hey, I really appreciate this, but I'm really interested in it. And I think that, yeah, you're right, it needs work, but I think it's worth the work. And the agent went on to sell that book, and it did well enough that that person sold a second book that has won lots of awards.
That's awesome.
So it's so subjective. I still, looking back on that book, I don't love it, but the agent did,
ask
and
who
that's
it
what
was?
mattered. Not on air.
Oh,
Afterwards.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you.
I remember you talked about it before off air, but I can't remember what book it is.
Yeah, because I know even when I interned there, they didn't want us saying that we interned at the Bent agency. And now that I don't intern there, it's fine. But
yeah, well,
yeah.
and it's the same thing. There's been a few when I was interning as well, when I have been interning as well, where the agent I was working for was concentrating on something else and didn't have the time for this. And then I've gone and literally seen it on Publishers Marketplace, sold at auction. And I was like, oh, that happened twice now, right? So it's not necessarily that she wouldn't have thought it was fabulous if she had read the whole thing, but she'd read the full and said, I didn't connect with it enough. And just because I've got so many other things on my plate, we're going to pass on it, right? So that's really, really common.
Well, and I had one where I was absolutely in love with the manuscript, and she was like, I think it's written fine, but it's just not my sort of
not
thing.
loving it. Yeah, that happens all the time.
Well, it wasn't even that she it was just the genre. I mean, it was technically one she represented, but just the concept of it wasn't interesting to her, and it was one of my favorite concepts ever. And that book is now published and doing pretty well. So
well, we all have such specific tastes. I love dark, creepy, whimsical stuff, and particularly in middle grade. And the agent that Kyra and I have both worked for, I don't think she would mind it if it's not too dark, but it's also not her super, in her wheelhouse as much. Yeah, it's not her main, focus. And so she's ended up turning some things down that I was like, I really liked this, right? I would have, if I was an agent, would have picked it up. And it's the same with I've been rejected because my middle grade is dark. And some people are like, oh, I don't like dark middle grade, right? And it's the same one that's being published now it was rejected 35 times or something, just because it was too dark for some people, or they just didn't connect with the characters. They didn't, so many different reasons.
Mm-hmm. We had a question. Do you have any, from Ed Griswold, do you have any I just got rejection pep talks or shake it off rituals?
Ice cream. The last time I got really rejected, hardcore, in Pitch Wars 2014, I literally lay on the ground and ate an entire baguette. So I don't know if I'm the person to talk about great things to
amazing.
Do after. Bread.
An entire baguette.
It was delicious.
Incredible.
Anyone have anything more constructive than baguette eating?
I mean, no, I'm a rejection eater too. Usually never baguettes. I've never done that. Baguettes are fine. They're not my go-to comfort food by any means. I think on a more constructive note, I like feeling like I have a plan. So I was we kind of talked about this earlier, okay, who am I going to query next? What I'm going to work on next? Because for me, sometimes it is kind of energizing. okay, pushing forward.
Mhm.
Let's go.
Yeah, in an industry where
I
you
talk
have
someone to myself for a little while. Like, oh man, they're awful. They don't get me. They don't get my genius. This is stupid. Like, this is the worst people ever. Never gonna work for them again. And then like 10 minutes later, once I've like,
it's like, oh,
you know,
it's
calm
fine.
myself down, I'm like, okay, let's like look at this constructively. But
Yeah. I feel like in an industry where there's so little control, taking control of the things that are in your power to do is really crucial. So like Erin said, like take the time to mourn when you get a rejection. But also like take the time to look at, okay, well, what happens if this book doesn't get an agent or doesn't sell? What can I do now to prepare for that possibility? And if it does sell, like what's the timeline going to be for that? What do I need to be thinking about now? And just like making very tangible goals and giving yourself rewards for meeting them. My reward is almost always going to Taco Bell. Like if I finish a book, I'm gonna go get some tacos.
so we have, like food
That's amazing.
rewards within us.
Yeah.
Mine's chocolate covered raisins, so like I can't blame you.
Dark
That's your
Crunch, like,
decadent
the little
reward is chocolate covered raisins.
Raisins are so good. I'm with you, Rachel.
I know it's a grandmother dessert, but it's my favorite.
A grandmother dessert. Hey, I can't say anything because I really like bridge mix. So.
Oh yeah, that's like the dad chocolate.
Such an old person thing to like.
Like my favorite desserts are like carrot cake and chocolate covered raisins, and everyone makes fun of me for it. Like that's
Are.
old
You're
people
like
food. And I'm like, yes, but they're
geriatric
delicious. I am an 80-year-old man at heart. Okay, it makes sense.
Something I found really helped, and we've said this before, but having a great network of writers that you can vent with is hugely important, because I think sometimes you see those writers that that reply back to agents and they're like, well, you're making a big mistake, or like the writers that go on a blog and they like list everyone that's rejected them and how they're going to regret it, and like the crazy things that some writers do. I feel like these are writers that don't have friends that they can vent to. Because I know
like
that one of
origin story.
One of the saving sanity things is like being able to have the WordNerds, and then I have another writers group that I can vent to, and like so I'll just go on Facebook and be like, this is the rejection I just got, it sucked so much, like, and they'll be like, oh, that person is dumb, like all of the silly things
You're
you say
great.
to each
We
other.
love you.
Yeah, all the things you say, you know, to make your friend feel better. That editor clearly has no idea. They wouldn't know a good story if it hit them in the face. Like, you know, all of the things that you have to say to make your friend feel better.
Yeah.
Right. But like, you know, and you do it in private, but it really,
Not
really
in
helps.
public.
Not in
Yeah,
public.
not in
Yes,
public.
but it really helps to vent, get it off your chest. They commiserate with you, and you come out feeling a lot better. And then you don't have to reply to the agent and go, "I'm the next bestseller," right?
Yeah.
And make a fool of yourself. So.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that you don't necessarily have to have writer friends to do for you. Like if you have good non-writer friends who are going to be sympathetic and like pay attention to you when you say, hey, this hurts and it sucks, they can be great too, because they literally don't know and have never told you that your writing was bad. Like, it's like, I don't know, you look like a book on a shelf to me. Like, wait, I guess.
My favorite thing is the friends that are like, you read a lot, I'm sure your book is awesome.
It is. I find that like I have both types of friends, like the pen muggles and then the writers as well. And like I do find it much more cathartic to vent to my writer friends because they so know what I'm going through, right? Because we did that last month with someone else. You know, it was commiserating with them last month. So I mean, if you don't have writer friends, but they don't have to be like someone that you can drive 15 minutes and go see. Like the WordNerds are like on the other side of the world from each other, but we, you know, are like on a Facebook chat together, and that's where we vent to each other.
Snapchat.
So yeah, so you can find friends on Twitter or Absolute Write or whatever, writer friends that you can, you know, or even find a writer group on Facebook. I'm part of a few of those, and there'll be like the rejection thread where you go and you share your rejections, and people tell you that sucks, you're amazing, you're going to do it, and so yeah, it doesn't have to be like, you know, a best friend that lives next door. It can be someone online that you find. So
We're all in this together. What is this? Is not the High School Musical dance. I just don't know the High School Musical dance.
I think we can't top that. I think we just need to end with singing.
With Rachel dancing and singing.
High School Musical.
We did have one more question that I'm curious about from Mr. Eaton91. What's the most blunt rejection you've ever gotten? I've gotten. This isn't from me, but thanks for the read. Simple and to the point, I guess. LOL.
I'm trying to think.
I'll give you guys time to think. I've already thought of my answer.
Oh, good. Yes.
Well, at the beginning of the chat, before Megan and Emma, you joined us, we were talking about like ways that we've been rejected. And for me, I was writing an article for this online magazine, and they didn't quite say it like this, but they overall said like it needs to be more sophisticated. So I was kind of like, all right, cool, thanks. Yeah.
I had a friend who's got a rejection from an editor that said your writing is juvenile and not good enough.
Oh,
from an editor at a publishing.
So unnecessary. So rough.
Yeah.
Ugh.
They're usually not that harsh.
No, they're not.
No.
usually.
To clarify.
The worst one I probably ever got was from an agent. I shouldn't say worse. It was just startling because they said that my middle grade was unnecessarily violent. And yeah, and I won't say who the agent was, but she's someone who reps like a YA series that has a lot of violence in it. Like
a lot.
That's even better.
So I was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I was an undergrad, I did like the honors program at my university, so I had to write like basically a senior project, and I decided to do a creative project, and I was going to write a YA novel, and I had to get approved by like the director of the honors department, and so I like submitted this proposal, and he just like tore holes in it and said, like, I think one of the things he said was like, this sounds like a kid's book, and I was like, well, it's for teens. He's like an academic, right? Like he teaches like
the worst
mid-century like
academic writers.
Yeah. And like I had an a faculty mentor who like emailed me back after, because he got a copy of the proposal rejection too. And was like, hey, so that was weird. He's like, we'll work on anyway. Basically, I ended up like, because this wasn't like I could go pitch another agent or something, right? Like he was the guy I had to get approval from, but I like pitched a different YA book and like just kept pitching YA books at him until he like, I just wore him down or something. I don't know. But I think he was still skeptical, but I passed. I graduated with honors. It's great. So that was probably the weirdest rejection I've gotten though.
I got one
sorry. I was going to say, I have a similar one, actually. I think I've probably talked about this before, where I was in a creative writing class my last semester of college, and I wrote, like, a short story about, like, an 8-year-old kid. So it was, like, a children's short story. And this one guy in my class who was, like, very, like, uppity. He was, like, a philosophy major and stuff. He was, like,
of course.
There's always
write
one.
like it. That's literally what he said in his comment on it.
Say it one more time.
what?
Sorry. You cut out.
You're an adult. You should write like it.
Oh, wow. Where does he think children's books come from? That children write them?
Yeah, exactly.
Is he like guy in your MFA, basically?
Yeah, he really was. And like all of his stuff, like you would read it and I'd be like, am I stupid or does this just not make sense? Like I thought I was a fairly intelligent person, but I don't understand your short story.
It's just full of symbolism, Emma, and it just clearly went over your
head. If you have to ask,
it was always full of like philosophy, because he was a philosophy major, so it was full of all this like weird philosophy stuff where I was like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
I knew someone like that.
Dragons.
I need to ask you after we go off
Mine
air.
had dragons.
I need to ask you if it was the same guy after you go off air, because I worked with this guy who was a philosophy major, and he told me to my face, he's like, "You're lucky you write children's books because it's super easy." You know what?
Yeah, my most
Boy.
yeah. Mine was from an agent, and it was on Forsaken, and I don't remember the exact words, but they basically said, I loved the premise, but you couldn't execute it.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, oh, okay.
So unnecessary. Actually, it's funny because one of the worst things that ever happened to me, well, that's really dramatic, but one of the worst kind of forms of rejection I got was actually also in a writing group. And it was like, I should have known better than to bring a YA as well. It was a YA, and it was a science fiction YA. And it was like a bunch of old dudes, like in their like late 60s, that sat around and wrote these like really weird short stories. And I didn't connect with any of their short stories, so it should have been enough to be like, okay, we're not going to be on the same page with anything that we write. But I was like, I'll be polite about their stories when I'm critiquing them and, you know, all this type of stuff. And then they had this setup that I really didn't like, and I should have seen it coming. But they like, basically they would read the story when they were at home, bring it back, and then they would go around the table and tell you, this is what I think needs to be changed. This is what you need to work on. This is what I liked. So there'd be like 4, 5 of them, and you'd go around the table and it'd be like one person after another basically telling you what was wrong with your manuscript, right? Which is pretty harsh because you're like in the spotlight and there's like 6 people that dump on you at the same time. Anyways, they ripped apart my first chapter so badly, like in really harsh, unnecessary, I thought, terms. And then they literally at the end, the one guy, like, that was awesome, and high-fived the other guy. Like that literally happened.
Like,
and there was one point where he
rude,
guy,
dude.
yes, so rude.
Jeez.
And there was one guy that literally wrote on the manuscript, "WTF is this?" And I'm like, what is this critique? What am I supposed to do that?
How am I supposed to make my chapter better? Basically?
Yeah, and I had gone to this writing group with a friend, and when we left, I was like, was that super harsh, or am I just like really sensitive? He's like, no, I thought you were gonna cry. He's like, oh. He's like, I was surprised you didn't. I would have. And then yeah, we never went back to that. And I told him if I get this book published, I'm dedicating the book to them.
Yes.
Yeah, my creative writing class was weird because it was like 2/3 people, like it was probably like a third YA, a third like fantasy sci-fi people, like adult fantasy sci-fi, and a third like literary fiction people. So it was like the fantasy sci-fi people and the YA people, like we were able to like get each other's books even if they weren't quite our thing, you know? But then it was like the literary people were like, I just don't, what was the point of this? What was the moral? Anyway.
It's for fun.
We're fighting on a spaceship. Like.
What was the point of going into space? I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get it.
Oh dear.
And you're going to have people who just don't get your book, right? Like,
Well, what was the point of Leonard going to the grocery store and buying 3 lemons, Karen? Like,
the lemons were symbolic, Rachel.
Obviously.
Around different places, and you were like, what?
Yeah.
God damn
And it's like,
Karen.
you just have to know like who you should work with. Like, we will not be beneficial critique partners for anyone who writes lit fic. Likewise, they will not be beneficial for us.
No, it's so true. I'm sure there's.
If you're a philosophy major, we don't hate you.
Yeah.
Don't
We don't mean you're not a jerk.
Exactly. If you're a philosophy major, then we hate you regardless.
Yeah. There's just I mean, I will never be a good critique person for like literary books because I'll read it and be like, why did Karen and Bob sit in a room for 5 chapters and talk about lemons?
Lemons.
Lemons. It was all symbolic, but whoosh, like I don't care.
Like, why is the plot moving forward?
Yeah, exactly. When do the aliens come in?
Yeah.
Where's the dragons?
Exactly.
I'd be the person in the corner like, did you know in fan fiction, lemons is sexy times? Is this about sex?
True.
Wait, is it?
Probably is about sex. Okay.
Yeah, like in like synopses, sometimes it'll be like lemon in chapter 3 or something.
Really?
You go to avoid chapter 3
Oh
if you
my
don't
god,
want
I
to
didn't
read
know
that.
this.
I did not know this. Okay,
We were
so
thinking
was
of
I don't know why
fan
I speak
fiction
lemons and I'm like
community.
That's hilarious. Oh,
So
good.
We know all the
Deeply
fan
symbolic
fiction
the whole
terminology.
Oh, I was thinking about like lemons, but representing like the bitterness in my soul or something like that.
I still remember, like, I went to some literary talk with Donald Mass, the literary agent. I actually really like him, but he talked about symbolism for a while and something about eggs and cracking eggs, and I was just like, oh. The only reason I crack eggs is to make an omelet. Otherwise, I don't care.
Like, is the character
Symbolism
making a cake? Because then I get
Yeah.
it.
I'm down with
What?
that.
Otherwise, like,
cookies.
symbolism only happens accidentally in my stories, and then it's like, whoops, yeah, I totally meant to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'll do symbolism on purpose occasionally, but it's almost always in revisions.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like kind of like Stephen King's way of looking at it, where he says like reread and see the themes that you've accidentally put in, and then just like flush them out, so it looks like you did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like a huge thing in kid lit is just like, if you try and write with a theme in mind, it's gonna be obvious.
It's gonna suck.
Feel
Yeah.
preachy.
Kids will see right through you if you're trying to insert a moral into the book.
And kids are freaking insightful.
Oh,
Yes.
they are.
Yes.
Although I did learn from a recent Twitter thread that a whole bunch of people didn't realize that Chronicles of Narnia was like Jesus.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
How do you miss
Yeah,
that?
I think it was Caroline that like asked like, how old were you and did you realize it was about like Christianity? That was like an allegory. And so many people were like, no, I didn't get it.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
He dies for another person's sins, like, and then he comes back.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious theme there.
Yeah. Some kids won't notice your moral that you inserted, but
That's true. An allegory is more like of a broad over. Well, if you don't know the Bible, then I guess.
It's a Bible read.
yes, I get it
Yes.
if you weren't raised in the Christian culture or anything.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Like everyone knows C.S. Lewis is huge, like a huge Christian. Like everybody knows this.
If you know about C.S. Lewis, yes.
Yeah, if you're 8, you probably don't know that about C.S.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But like if you know anything about C.S. Lewis,
Rachel
you know
was
that he's
just a
Christian.
really advanced 8-year-old.
Maybe
Reading
who
the screw
knows?
tape letters at 6, you know, it's cool.
She read the screw. I couldn't even read the screw tape letters.
Yeah.
I tried to get through the screw tape letters like 17 years old and was no pass.
I never read a full Bible, so I don't know. Don't take anything from me.
Any more questions?
I'm not seeing any. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I thought there was more to the sentence. Okay.
There was gonna be, but then I decided to just let you do it.
Okay. We've been going for a while now. So does anyone have any final points on rejection, dealing with rejection? Any final thoughts?
If you don't love writing enough to do it without getting published, then you don't love it enough to do it being published.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Take up collecting stamps or something. Be a lot less heartbreaking. But I mean, if you love writing, don't let rejections drag you down, because eventually if you keep going, you will get where you want to go. So
Yeah.
closing
We all
statement.
started out as terrible writers.
Yes.
We're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible.
Some days I still think I am.
Same.
I think that's pretty common. Yeah.
Yeah. But we all believe in you. You can totally do it.
You can do it. All right. Thank you everyone for watching. Thanks for all your awesome questions. We hope to see you next Sunday, where we don't know what the topic is.
It's book club.
It's book club.
It's book club.
History, yes. History is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera.
It
Yes.
was so good, you guys. You've got to read it.
Gotta read it. Okay, so we do know what the next topic is about. It is book club. So
Hooray.
join us next Sunday. So yeah, thanks for coming. Bye.